Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. We're going to be reading Castaway of the Flying Dutchman by Brian Jacks. Castaways of the Flying Dutchman. Illustrated by Ian Schonenher. The legend of the Flying Dutchman, who knows how it all began? Throughout the centuries, many a seaman could swear on an oath that he had seen the phantom ship prowling an endless course over storm-tossed seas and the deeps of mighty oceans. Many a night mariners had sat together in a lantern-filled forecastle, heads speaking in hushed tones of the vessel and its master, Captain Vanderdecker. What awful curse sent the Flying Dutchman bound on an eternal voyage across the trackless watery waste, from the Marquesas of the Arctic circles, from the coral seas of the Eustephanean Straits, forever roaming alone? Wherever the ghostly craft is sighted, death is near. Bad for fortune hovers about the poor sailors who see by chance what they wish with their eyes had never witnessed: the Flying Dutchman. The salt-stiffed rigging and gale-torn sails flapping eerily, a barnacle-encrusted prow down by the bow is soughing troughs of blue waves, grooved by silent wraiths of humanity to whom time and the elements have no end. Vanderdecker paces the quarterdeck, his face like the yellow phantom parchment, his hair laced with flying spume, wild, hopeless eyes searching the horizons of the world, bound for the for eternity. For what dead crime, which unspoken law of man, nature, or God did he break? What dread nemesis doomed him and his crew and their ship? Who knows how it all began? Only two living beings, and I'll take out my pen to tell you the tale. The ship. Copenhagen, 1628. They sat down facing one another across a table in the upper room of a drinking den known as the Barbary Shark. Two men, one a Dutchman sea captain, the other a Chinese gem dealer. Muffled sounds of foghorns from the nighttime harbor, mingling with the rapacious seaport din outside, passed unheeded. A flagon of fine gin and a pitcher of water close to hand also stood ignored in the dim smoke-filtered atmosphere. Both men's eyes were riveted upon a small blue velvet packet which the gem dealer had placed upon the table. Slowly he wrapped the cloth, allowing a large emerald to catch facets of the golden lantern light. It shimmered like the eye of a fabled dragon. Reflected, Noting the reflected glint of the Dutchman's vivacious stare, the Chinaman placed his long-nailed hand over the jewel and spoke softly. My agent waits in Valsperio for the arrival of a certain man, somebody who can bring home to me a package. It contains the brothers and sisters of the Green Stone, many of them, some of the larger ones, others smaller, but any one of them worth a fortune. Riches to fire a man beyond his wildest dreams. He would bring the greenstones to me must be a strong man, commanding and powerful, able to keep my treasure from the hands of others. My friend, I have eyes and ears everywhere on the waterfront. I choose you because I know you to be such a man. The captain's eyes, bleak and gray as the winter seas, held the merchant's gaze. You have not told me what my reward for the task will be. The gem dealer averted his eyes from the captain's fearsome stare. He lifted his hand, exposing the green emerald's fire. This is beautiful one, and two more like it upon delivery. The Dutchman's hand closed over the stone as he uttered a single word. Done. A boy ran, his mouth wide open, gasping to draw in fog-laden air. His broken shoes slapped wetly over the harbor cobblestones. Behind him, the heavy, well-trodden feet of his pursuers pounded, drawing closer all the time. He staggered, forcing himself to keep going, stumbling through pools of yellow tavern lights and onto milky, muffling darkness. He would go back again. He would never would he go back again. Never again would the family of his stepfather treat him like an animal, a drudge, a slave. Cold sweat stammered down into his eyes as he forced his leaden legs onward. Life? No sane being could call that life, a mute, dumb from birth with no real father to care for him. His mother, frail creature who did not live long after her marriage to Borson, the hearing merchant, after the death of the boy, was forced to live in a cellar. Borgeson and his three hulking sons treated their captive to no better than a dog. The boy ran with the resounding clatter of Borgeson's sons closing behind him. His aim was to escape them and their miserable existence. Never would he go back. Never. The scar-faced Burmesian seaman crept swiftly downstairs, where he joined the others in a darker corner of the Barbary Shark Tavern. He nodded to his cohorts, whispering, "Captain, come now." They were all sailors of varied nationalities, and villainous bunch of wharf rats as ever to put foot on shipboard. Drawing further back into the shadows, they watched the staircases which led from the upper room. The blue scar on the face of the Burmese twitched as he winked at the others. "I hear ya. Captain goes for the greenstones." A heavily bearded green Englishman smiled thinly. "So we ain't taking a cargo of iron wave to Valabor, Shio. What does Vanderkin think he's fooling, eh? He's only going out there to pick up the king's ransom of precious stones." A hawk-faced Arab drew a dagger from his belt. "Then we collect our wages, yes?" The Englander, who was the ringleader, seized the Arab's wrist. "Aye, we'll live by the lords for the rest of our lives, mate. But you still that blade. Wait till I give the word." They took another drink before leaving the Barbary Shark. The boy stood facing his pursuers. He was trapped, with no place to run, his back to the sea. Borstrin's three big sons, close in on the edge of the wharf, with their victims, stood gasping for air and trembling in the fog-bound night. Reaching out, the tallest of the three trio grabbed the lad's ship front. With a muted animal-like grunt, the boy sank his teeth into his captor's hands. The Borgeson's son roared in pain, releasing his quarry and instinctively lashing out with his good hand. He cuffed the boy with a heavy blow to the jaw, stunning the youngster reeled backward, missed his footing, and fell from the top of the wharf pylon, splashing into the sea. He went straight down and under the surface. Kneeling on the edge, the three brothers stared into the dim, greasy depths. A slim stream of bubbles broke the surface. There was nothing. Fear registered on the bruised face on the one who had done the deed, but he recovered his composure quickly, warning the other two. We could not find him. Nobody will know. He had no relatives in the world. What another dumb fool, or less. Come on. Checking to see that they had not been noticed in the dark fog, the trio scurried off home. Standing at the gangplank, the Dutch captain watched the last of his crew emerge from the misty swathes which wreathed the harbor. He gestured them aboard. Drinking again, Ja? Well, they'll be little enough to get drunk on between here and the Pacific side of the Americas. Come aboard now and make ready for sail. The Blue Scar contacted as the Burmesian smiled. Aye, aye, Captain. We'll make sail. With a flood tide swirling under her hulls, the stern fenders scraping against the wharf timbers, the vessel came about, facing seaward. Staring ahead into the fog, the captain brought the wheel around the point and called, Let's go! Let go aft! The Finnish soldier, standing astern, flicked the rope expertly, jerking the noose end of the bollard which he held it. The rope splashed into the water. Shivering in the cold night air, he leapt he left into the trail along, not wanting to get his hands wet and frozen by hauling the backwater rope onward. He quickly he ran quickly to the galley and held his hands over the warm stove. The boy was half in and half out of conscious, numbed to his bones in the cold sea. He felt the rough Melina Marilena rope brush against his cheek and seized it. Painfully, hand over hand, he hauled himself upward. When his feet touched the ship's timbers, the boy pulled his body clear of the icy sea and found a ledge, and he huddled it onto it. Looking up at the name painted on the vessel and stern in faded gold embellished red, Flager Hollander. He had never learned to read, so the letters meant nothing to him. Flage Hollander in Dutch, or had been able to understand English, Flying Dutchman. Okay, chapter 2. Morning light found the fog had lifted and revealing a clear, blue, icy day. The Flying Dutchman plowed past, goats aboard, under full sail, ready to round the Saken Point and sail down to the Sakarak, out into the wide North Sea. Philip Van Decker, captain of the vessel, braced himself on the small forecastle deck, feeling the buck and swell of the ship. Light spray from the bow wave touched his face. Ropes and canvas thrummed to the breeze overhead. Valparaiso bound where his share of greenstones would make him a rich man for life. It was never a man to smile, but he allowed himself a single bleak nod of satisfaction. Let the shipowners find another fool to sail this slop bucket around the high seas. Leave the crew of wharf scum to pit their wits against another captain. He strode from one end of the vessel to the other, snapping curt commands at a surly bunch of that manned the craft. Often he would wheel suddenly about. Vanderdecker neither liked nor trusted his crew. Judging by the glances he received and the muttering conversations that ceased at his approach, he knew they were speculating about the trip and plotting against him in some way, probably. His solution to this was simple: keep hands busy night and day, show them who's master. Vanderdecker's quick eye missed nothing, and he glanced past the steersman on the ice-crusted rope left trailing astern, signaling the Finnish deckhand with a nod. He pointed, "Stow that line and coil it, or the sea water will ruin it." The deckhand was about to make some remark when he noted the challenging look in the captain's eye. He touched his cap. Aye, aye, Captain. Vanderdecker was making his way amidship when the Finn leaned over the stern railing, shouting, "Come look here! I think he's dead." All hands turned to the stern, crowding the rail to see. Pushing his way through, the captain stared down at the crumpled figure on the molding below his cabin gallery. Crouched there was a boy with sea water and frost. Vanderdecker turned to his men, his voice harsh and flat. "Leave him there or push him into the sea, I don't care." The ship's cook was a fat, bearded Greek who left his galley to see what the excitement was about. He spoke up, "I don't have a galley boy. If he's alive, I'll take him." The captain gave the cook a scornful glance. "He'd be better off dead than working for you, Petros. Do what you want. The rest of you get back to work." Lumbering down to the stern cabin, Petros opened the window and dragged the lad in. To all apparent purposes, the boy looked dead, though when the Greek placed a knife near his lips, a faint mist clouded it. "By my beard, he breathes." He carried the boy to the galley and laid him on some sacking in the corner near the stove. The ship's mate, an Englishman, came into the galley for a drink of water. Placing the toe of his boot against the boy's body, he nudged him. "The lad hasn't responded?" The Englander shrugged. "Looks dead to me. I'd sling him over the side if I was you." Petros pointed with his keen knife at the Englander. "Well, you not see me. You not me. See, I say he stays. If he comes around, uh, I'll need help in the galley, lots of help. He's mine." Backing off from the knife, the Englander shook his head. "Huh, yours. Like the captain said, that one's better dead." For almost 2 days the boy lay there. On the second evening, Petros was making a stew of salt cod, turnips, and barley. Blowing into the ladle, he tasted a bit. As he did, the Greek cast a glance down at the boy. His eyes were wide open, gazing hungrily at the stew pot. "So many little fishies, eh?" The boy's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Petros took a greasy-looking wooden spoon and laid some stew, and then placed it into the boy's open hands. "Eat!" It was bubbling hot, but he did not seem to deter the lad. He bolted it down and held the empty bowl up to the cook. The bowl went spinning from his grasp as Petros hit it with the ladle, narrowing his eyes pitilessly. No free trippers aboard this ship, little fish. I caught you, now you belong to me. When I say work, you work. When I say you eat, you eat. When I say sleep, you sleep. Got it? But you won't hear me saying eat or sleep much. It'll be mostly work hard, hard work. Or back over the side you go. Do you believe me? He reached the boy upright and reached for his knife. The wide-eyed youngster nodded furiously. Petros filled a pail of water, tossing it into a broken holy stone and a piece of the rag, then thrust it at the slave. You clean this galley out good, deckhands, bulkheads, the lot. Hey, what's your name? You got a name? The boy pointed to his mouth and made a small, strange noise. Petros kicked him. What's the matter? You got no tongue? The Arab had just walked in, and he grabbed the boy's jaw and forced his mouth open. He has a tongue. Petros turned back to the stirring the soup. Then why doesn't he talk? Are you dumb, boy? The lad nodded vigorously. The Arab released him. You have to have a tongue and still not be able to talk. You can have a tongue and still not be able to talk. He's dumb. Petros filled a bowl for the Arab and made a mark with a row of symbols on the wooden board to show the Arab had received his food. Dumb or not, he can still work. Here, Jamil, take this to the captain. He indicated the meal to a seat tray. Meal to set out on a tray. The Arab ignored his request, sitting close to the stove. He started eating. Take it yourself. The boy found himself hauled upright again. Petros was acting out a strange pantomime of many fools to do who think somebody is stupid merely because they cannot speak. You can take this to Captain, you understand? Petros stood to attention, mimicking Vanderdecker's stance, then made it as if he were a captain dining, tucking on an imaginary napkin into his shirt front. Captain, understand? Hey, Jamel, what what do you call a boy with no name? Nebuchadnezzar. Petros looked askance at the Arab. What sort of name is that? Jamal's broke ship's biscuit into his stew and stirred it. I hear a Christian read it once from a Bible book. Good, eh? Nebuchadnezzar. I like that name. Petros scratched his big, grimy beard. Nebuchadnezzar. It's too hard to say. I'll just call you Neb. That'll do. He presented the boy with a tray, then poked his finger several times into the lad's narrow chest. Neb, Neb, you're called Neb now. This to Captain Neb. Go carefully. Spill any and I'll skin you with my knife, yes? Neb nodded solemnly and left the galley as if he were walking on eggs. Jamil slurped stew noisily. He understands all right. He'll learn. Petros stroked the knife edge against the greasy stone. Neb better learn, or else. A timid knock sounded on the captain's cabin door. Somehow or another, Neb had found his way there. Vanderdecker looked up from a single emerald he had been given as a part payment. Stuffing it swiftly into his vest pocket, he called out, Come! As the door opened, the Dutchman had his hand on a sword set on a lever under the edge of the table. None of the crew would ever catch him napping. That would be a fatal error. A look of mild surprise passed across his hardened features as the boy entered with a tray of food. Vanderdecker indicated the table with a glance. Neb set the tray there. So you never died after all. Do you know who I am, boy? Neb nodded twice, watching for the next question. Can you speak? Neb shook his head twice. He stood looking at the deck, aware of the captain's piercing stare, waiting to be dismissed. Maybe it isn't so bad, no bad thing. I've heard it said that silence is golden. Are you golden, boy? Are you lucky? Or are you a Jonah, and the unlucky one, eh? Neb shrugged expressively. The captain handed straight to his vest pocket and he patted it. Luck is for fools who believe in that sort of thing. I make my own luck. I, Vanderdecker, master of the Flying Dutchman. Immediately he applied himself to the food, wrinkling his nose in distaste as he looked up at Neb. Are you still here? Off with you. Be gone, boy. Bobbing his head respectfully, Neb retreated from the cabin. Next day and every day after, there that was much the same. Neb punctuated with oaths, kicks, and smarting blows from the knotted rope that the fat, greasy sea-cook Petros had taken to carrying. The lad was used to this kind of treatment, having suffered much in the lands of the Borgensen family abroad aboard the Flying Dutchman. The only difference was there was nowhere to run and fewer places to hide. However, Ned bore the ill usage, being mute and not being able to complain. He had made him all above a savior to he had grown to possess a quiet, resolute strength. Neb hated Petros, and along with the rest of the crew, showed him no pity, no friendliness. The captain was a different matter. The boy knew that Vanderdecker was feared by every soul aboard. He had a ruthless air of power about him that scared Neb, though he was not needlessly cruel, providing his orders were obeyed swiftly and without question. The boy's survival instincts told him that he was safer than the captain, than the others, a fact he accepted stoically. There's a puppy, black lab. Eisenberg was the last place in Denmark the Flying Dutchman would touch before sailing out into the North Sea, and down through the English Channel. Beyond that, she was bound into the great Atlantic Ocean. Some of the crew ordered ashore to bring back final provisions. Petros and the Englander headed the party. Captain Vanderdecker stayed in his cabin poring over charts before he departed. The Greek cook grabbed Neb, shackled him by the ankle to the foot of the iron galley stove. Not giving you the chance to run off just while I'm training you right. Slaves are scarce in Denmark. You can reach the table. There's salt, pork, cabbage, and a chop for the pot. Keep you busy. I'm taking my knife with me, using that old one. You know what will happen if the work's not done by the time I get back. He waved the knotted rope at the boy and then waded out to join the others who were off to the ship's chandlery. Neb could only move a short distance either way because of the iron slave shackle. Escaping was out of the question. Though the door was open, he could see the jetty the ship was marooned to, freedom so near yet so far away. He applied himself to the task of chopping pork and cabbage. It was hard work. The knife had a broken handle and a dull blade. In his frustration, he vented his feelings upon the meat and vegetables, chopping viciously. At least it was warm inside the galley. Outside it was cold, gray afternoon with rain drizzling steadily down. He sat on the floor by the stove, the watching the jetty for the crew returning. They had been gone for several hours. A half-starved dog wandered furtively along the jetty, sniffing out for scraps. Ned watched the wretched creature. Despite his own plight, the boy's heart went out to it. The dog was barely identifiable as a black Labrador, half-grown but emancipated, ribs as though its mud-caked and scarred fur. One of its eyes was closed over and running. It sniffed up and down the timbers, getting close to the ship. Poor creature, it seemed to be ready to take off a bullet at the slightest noise. It had been badly served by some master. That is, if it had ever known an owner. Pursing his lips together, the boy made encouraging sounds. The dog stopped sniffing and looked at him. He held out his open palms to it and smiled. It put its head to the side, regarding him through one great sad dark eye. Neb took a piece of salted pork rind and tossed it to the dog. Gratefully it gulped the scrap down, wagging its tail. He made the noise again and took more rind, holding it out to the dog. Without hesitation, came straight up to the gangplank and boarded the ship. Within seconds, the boy was stroking the Labrador's wasted body while it devoured the food. There was plenty of tough rind left from the salt pork. Sometimes the hands used it to bait for fish over the side at sea. While the dog ate, Ned took a rag from the warm water with salt in it and allowed the dog allowed him to bathe its eye, freed from the crusted debris of some old infection. Its eye gradually opened. It was clear and undamaged. Neb was pleased and hugged his newfound friend. He was rewarded by several sloppy licks from the dog's tongue. Knowing the of knowing the effects of salt pork rind, he gave it to in a pankin of fresh water. As the dog curled up by the galley stove, a fierce affection for the ownerless creature burned within Neb. He decided there and then that he was going to keep it. Spreading some old sacks out under the far corner of the table, he pushed the dog onto all of them, all that time petting and stroking it. His new friend made no fuss, but went quiet and willingly into the hiding place, staring at him with great trusting eyes as he covered it in more sacks. Ned peeped into the secret den and looked waringly at the dog and held a finger to his tight-shut lips. It licked his hand as if it understood to remain silent. A sound from behind caused Neb to scuttle from beneath the table. Captain Vanderdecker stood framed in the galley doorway, his teeth grinding as his shirt worked back and forth, as his jaw worked back and forth. Neb cowered, expecting to be kicked. Normally he slept beneath the galley table, only when told to go to bed. The captain's voice had the ring of steel in it. Where's Petros? And the rest? Not back yet? Wide-eyed with fear, the boy shook his head. Vanderdecker's fist clenched and unclenched, and he spat out the words viciously. Drinking. That's where the useless swine will be, pouring gin and ale down their slobbering faces in some drinking den. He stamped off raving, clenched teeth. If I miss the flood tide because of a bunch of drunken animals, I'll take a sword blade to them. Neb knew by the captain's prying eyes that there was going to be trouble no matter whether the crew arrived back early or late. For refuge he crawled under the table and with his dog, a warm tongue, licked his cheek as he huddled close to the black Labrador, staring into its soft dark eyes and stroking its thin neck. Neb wished fervently that he could talk to speak gently and reassure the dog. All that came out of his mouth was a hoarse little sound. It was enough. The dog whimpered quietly and laid its head on his lap, reinforcing the growing bond between them. Less than an hour and hurried and stumbling footsteps rang out onto the jetty. Neb peered out. The 5 men who had been seen for provisions came tumbling outward, followed by Vanderdecker like an avenging angel. He laid them about with a knotted rope, and Thatch snatched from Petros, thrashing them indiscriminately, his voice thundering out with a righteous wrath. Brainless, gin-sodden morons, half a day lost because of your stupidity. Can you keep your snouts out of flagons long enough to do a simple task? Worthless scum. The Dutchman showed no mercy. He flogged the 5 hands with furious energy, savagely booting flat any man who tried to rise or crawl away. Neb could not tear his eyes from the fearful scene. The captain's coattails whirled about him as he flogged the miscreants. Knotted rope tails striking flesh and bone sounded like chestnuts cracking under on a hearth amid the sobs and screams of his victims. When Vanderdecker had exhausted his energy, he flung some coins at the Chandler's assistants, waiting by the jetty with a load cart. You, get the supplies aboard before we lose the tide. Whilst the materials were being transferred, Petros raised his bruised and tear-stained face. He had spotted something none of the others had noticed. The emerald glinting on the deck where it had fallen from the captain's pocket when he was beating the crew. Slowly, carefully, the fat cook stretched out his grimy hand and retrieved to retrieve the gemstone. Yarg! He screeched as the Dutchman's boot heel smashed down on the back of his hand. Vanderdecker snatched the emerald, continuing to grind Petros's hand against the deck, thrusting all his weight onto the iron-tipped heel. Thief! Drunkard pirate! No man steals from me. Now we have a one-handed cook. Back to work, all of you. Cast off and midships. Make sail. Leave no lines drifting. Coil them, shipmate. Seamen, I'll make more seamen of you before this voyage is out. He stormed off to take the stem's place at the wheel, whimpering and moaning piteously. Petros crawled into the galley, falling flat on Neb's outstretched legs, which was still chained to the stove. Raising his tear-stained face to the boy, he sobbed piteously. He broke my hand, see? Petros's hand smashed, and for what? Nothing. That's what for, nothing. Neb felt sick looking at the hand. It was wretched beyond healing, a horrific sight. Blubbering into his greasy beard, the cook looked to Neb for help. Fix it for me, boy. Make me a bandage for poor Pestros's hand. Neb felt no pity for the fat, wicked cook. He was secretly glad the hand that had often beaten him was now useless. But he had to get the man upright before he looked under the table. The boy made his mute noise and pointed at the chain, indicating that he could do nothing until he was freed. Amid much groaning and wincing, Petros found the key with his good hand and unlocked the shackle. Neb helped him up onto a bench where he sat, weeping and nursing his hand. Drizzling rain gave way to a clear evening. Ropes, lines, and lines thrummed as the ship's vessel sail bellied tautly, backed by a stiffening breeze. The wheel spun under Vanderdecker's experienced hands as he guided the Flying Dutchman out into deeper waters. It was well out into the sea by the time Neb was done with his ministrations. Medical supplies were virtually nil aboard the vessel, but the boy used some relatively clean strips of coarse line from a palisade cover. Tearing the cloth into strips, he soaked them in clean salt water and bound hand and arm from fingertip to elbow. Petros howled as the salt stung broken bone and torn flesh, but he knew that the salt would clear up any infection. All that time, Neb's dog remained silent in his hiding place. The Englander and Jamal came fervently into the galley, Petros keeping up his whining, glad to see more of an audience to listen to his complaints. See the poor hand of Petros? Why use a man at is a man what use is a man at sea with only one good hand? I ask you, my friends, was there any need for that devil to do this to me? The Englander ignored the cook's misfortune. What did you try and pick up off the deck? Something that belonged to the captain, eh? Petros held out his good hand to the pair. Help me to my cabin, Scraggs. You too, Jamal. The boy's too small for me to lean on. Help me. Scraggs, the Englander, grabbed the bandaged hand from its sling. What did you pick up off the deck? Tell us. Nothing, my friend, I swear. Nothing. It was nothing. Jamal's curved dagger was at Petros's throat. You lie. Tell us, or I'll give you another mouth right now across your filthy neck. Speak. Petros knew they meant business, so he spoke rapidly. It was the green dragon's eye. A man could have bought 3 taverns with it. Scraggs shook his head and smiled at Jamie. See, I told you emeralds. That's what this trip's about. Looking hugely satisfied that his hunch had been confirmed, Scraggs strode the galley, leaving Jamal to help Petros to his cabin. Scraggs paused at the doorway and pointed his knife in Neb's direction. Not a word to anyone. Lad, do you hear? Neb nodded vigorously. The Englander smiled at his own mistake. Oh, how could you say a word? You're a mute. Okay, we're going to stop at chapter 4. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we fight our country's battles in the air, on land, and sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marines. Our flags unfurled to every breeze, from dawn to setting sun. We have fought in every clime and place where you could take a gun. In the snow of far-off northern lands, and in sunny tropic scenes, you will find us always on the job, the United States Marines. Here's health to you and to our corps, which we are proud to serve. In many a strife we fought for life and never lost our nerve. If the Army and the Navy ever looked on heaven's scenes, they will find the streets are guarded by United States Marines. Semper Fi, hoorah. Beautiful day in June here. I'll be back reading this book tomorrow. Castaways, the Flying Dutchman. Very good book. Been spending my time practicing typing and practicing Braille. We'll get there. All right, let me pray us out, and I'll wish you all well. Dear Lord, thank you for today. We stand your hand and protection on everyone. In my name, amen. Emmanuel, God with us.